The International Parking and Mobility Institute is pleased to present this Shop Talk titled Planning for an EV Future, Avoiding Pitfalls and Planning Future Forward. My name is Kenny, and I'll be assisting the moderator for today's Shop Talk. If you need assistance at any time during the program, please raise your hand or use the chat feature, and we will assist you. Today's Shop Talk will last 60 minutes. Please feel free to queue up a question for us at any time for today's presentation. To enter questions, simply click the chat and type your question and press enter. You can also turn your microphone and camera on to ask a question or make a comment. All registered participants will receive an archived version of this Shop Talk in a few days. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator and panelists, Jim Burness, Kate Schoaf, and Ray Humbert. Guys, the audience is all yours.
Thanks, Kenny. Great to be here. We've been members of IPMI for many years, and we'll be looking forward to seeing everybody in Fort Worth in just a little under a month, as Kathleen reminded us. But let me get things started here, share my screen. So hopefully this will work as well as it did in the run through. Okay. So thanks for attending, everybody. Today we're going to talk about planning for an EV future, avoiding pitfalls and planning for what's to come. As Kenny mentioned, I'm Jim Burness, founder and CEO of National Car Charging. We actually got started in EV charging way back in 2011. So we've been at this for almost 12 years now. To date, we have put in 8,000 ports in 48 states. There's not a whole lot we haven't seen. Brought along a couple of colleagues in the industry here, and I'll let them introduce themselves. First is Kate Schoaf from ChargePoint. Kate, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. My name is Kate Schoaf. As Jim said, I'm the product marketing manager at ChargePoint. ChargePoint is an EV charging company. We were one of the first to market, and we started way back in 2007, if you can believe it. So before there was mass market EVs on the road, we were doing our thing. We've expanded ever since. I think we have over 200,000 ports across the United States, and a little bit in Canada, and of course in other countries as well. We're just really happy to be here. One of my focuses is parking and hospitality, and as all of you know, there's a lot of overlap there. So I'm very excited to be here today.
Thanks, Kate. And another guest that we're glad to have with us is Ray Humbert, recently retired from ASU. National Car Charging had the honor of serving as ASU's supplier for 5 years, and hopefully moving forward as well. And so Ray and I got to know each other very well as he went from, I think, 4 or 5 ports on campus to over 100. So Ray, you want to pop in and say hello?
Thanks, Jim. Hey, hello, good morning, everybody. I don't know what the weather is like for here, but it's a little cool for Phoenix. We're like close to 80 degrees right now. So heck, let's take it easy. I see some people I know on that are in the meeting, so it's good to see familiar faces. I was the Associate Director of Parking and Transit Services for the Arizona State University. I recently retired 2 months ago, and I'm the one who basically helped start the EV program at ASU. We started with Jim got our contract, and we started, like Jim said, we started with 4 to 6 ports, and as we kept moving, we're at currently now over 100 ports on all 4 of our campuses. So it's pretty exciting to see how this industry has grown. We have ChargePoint chargers, so I am quite familiar with a lot of the people at ChargePoint and a great team that they have to help assist us. Jim has been fantastic. Not trying to give anybody a commercial break here, but I'm just saying that it's the teamwork that you need between all the people involved, not just the manufacturers, but the installers, and also my team, the team at the university who pushes this. And our president Crow is quite big on sustainability. So it was a big plus for us to keep moving forward in the EV market. So I'm excited to be here.
I think it's fair to say that President Crow's charging port was one of the top priorities as we got rolling with this project. So it was great to have the Chancellor's support on that. Well, let's hop in here, and I think it's important to set the stage. There's a lot of news in the press about electric vehicles coming, but that's not always accurate because they really are here today. In fact, we did a tweet a couple weeks ago kind of a throwaway tweet, but I on a Saturday morning, I said, in 10 seconds, we saw at one intersection an F-150 Lightning, a Chevy Bolt, Tesla Model X, BMW iX, and a Rivian R1S, all at the same intersection in Denver, Colorado. And as you can see, one of the people said, "Oh, you must have been in California." No, this is actually in Denver. So this is something that is here today, and they have sold almost 11 million electric vehicles in 2022 alone globally. That is 1 in 7 cars. So we're already up well above 10%. So we're continuing to see that hockey stick jump as we go. In the US alone, sales increased by 65% in 2022. And the chart below, you can see how Tesla has really been dominant. But as the competitors come in, they're actually their market share is shrinking. I actually just spent a week in Europe and on a business trip, and it was astounding how many cars are available on the market. Tesla, for example, there is actually a fairly small player. You'll see them, but not as dominant as they are in the US. So every automaker is getting into this. And this is a chart we found that I thought was really interesting in terms of how many billions of dollars, and that's billions with a B, is going into this. The circle on the left is the battery investment. Circle on the right is actually the vehicle investment itself. And some companies are outsourcing the batteries, some are doing it in-house. But the number of dollars that are going into this, and the automakers have said that this is something that this is the future. Many of them have stopped R&D and on the gas car, the gas motors. A lot of this is being spurred by government action around the world, especially in Europe. The EU has said that there will be no gasoline or diesel vehicles available for sale starting in 2035. Some have actually pulled that forward. The UK has said 2030 and Norway has said 2025. Today, Norway already has over 90% of new car sales have a plug. And there was actually an article in the New York Times just yesterday about how they're about 10 years ahead of the US, and the sky has not fallen, which was one of the things that you often hear out there. The grid can't handle it, et cetera, et cetera. Norway has proven that it works, actually. We don't need to be nearly as much of a victim to the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that some of the legacy interests are putting out there. What this means for the parking industry is that it opens up all sorts of opportunities that just wouldn't be feasible in the past. You can put it in your parking lot, in your parking garage. When I first met Ray, he had a couple ports on campus, but didn't have a gas station on campus, I don't believe. And now there's 100 different places where you can park on ASU campus to fill your car. And so the charging behavior is very different from what you see with gasoline behavior. With gas car, you go down to empty, you fill it back up to full, you go down to empty, fill it back up to full. With EV charging, actually, it's much more what we call opportunity charging. So, you may the driver may pull in and have 75% charge, but the port is there. They're going to plug in, they'll leave with 95%, for example. But it really does open up the possibilities of where people can fuel their vehicle. However, as busy as we are at National Car Charging and at ChargePoint and the other manufacturers of charging equipment around the country and around the world, we're pretty far behind on demand. So I think it's important to keep the perspective here. If you think that it's a little bit too early to get into this, it is not. The demand is growing fast. I often will say it at some of these talks. There's a lot of free money out there from utilities, from states, from the feds, et cetera. You don't want to be the person that starts your charging project the day after the funds run out. So make sure, and it is going to be somebody out there, right? So you want to make sure that you start planning now if you haven't done something, You want to start now. If you are doing something, you probably want to take a look at the numbers and see if you're doing enough. And there are, as I said, there are all sorts of different incentives out there. There's some from the states, some from the utilities, there's grants, there's rebates, some are competitive, some you just put it in and you get it. And then you'll hear an acronym that will become more and more prevalent over the years. NEVI, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure. That is the federal program that's going to put chargers every 50 miles along every interstate. And there's $5 billion that's coming into the market for that. With that, we've learned quite a bit over the last 10 years and 12 years almost. And some of those we can talk about because it really has changed the landscape. One of the stats that we hear over and over again is that retrofits are 8 times more expensive than putting in conduit at new construction. And so if you are building something new or doing a significant remodel or anything where the ground is torn up, you want to put in a lot of extra conduit. We will often tell customers, if you have the ability, put in conduit for anywhere from 2 to 3 times as much as the number of ports you're trying to put in today, because it's going to be something that you don't want to tear up the ground more than once if you don't have to. A good example is we have a client, a defense contractor that put in 2 stations, 2 dual port stations, but they wired for 5. And a year and a half later, after the first 2 went in, they called and said, all right, we want 2 more. And because they put all that infrastructure in ahead of time, it was a half-day job to add those 2 extra units. And they were very grateful to have done that. I've never had a client say, you know what, we put too much conduit in. Never happened. And conduit's cheap. So plan ahead for sure if you have the ground open. Even the National Association of Convenience Stores are telling their members, if you are not putting in conduit as you're doing remodel, you're going to kick yourself later. It also plays into how you design facilities, for example. For instance, is your electrical room going to be big enough? Do you have places where you can put in raceways without having to x-ray and core drill in the future, et cetera? And then the other thing is really kind of thinking about it not only in the next year, but 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. And both Kate and Ray can speak to this as we get into the Q&A piece. But do you want to collect revenue? If not today, do you think you're going to want to collect revenue down the road? Is this something that's going to be a differentiator or a loyalty builder? Kate, I'm sure can talk about how in hospitality we're getting to the point where EV charging is not too different from Wi-Fi. If you don't have it, people are going to be bypassing your hotel, et cetera. Is it an amenity to keep people on your property, or is this something that you're doing as a societal benefit? Right now in America, about half of all residents live in a single family home, but the other half live in multifamily, and not all multifamily locations have charging. In fact, nowhere near enough have EV charging. So, your school, their workplace, city library, et cetera, may be their next best place to charge. And then what other opportunities are you not looking at that are worth considering? For instance, if you have a downtown parking garage that is empty at night, do you want to put in charging and all of a sudden become a depot for rideshare services, et cetera? I'm going to pause real quick and let Kate and Ray hop in. But do you want to share a little bit about some of the planning questions that you've seen develop over the last couple of years? Kate, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so first of all, I wanted to say that we do have an ebook out there about why now is the time to start thinking about installing EV chargers. Jim, I think you made a really good point around that. But yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things to think about when you're installing. First of is how many are you going to manage? If you want to have different pricing for different times of the day, that's a really big question that I don't think everyone thinks about, and it's not available for all chargers. So something you really want to see if that's important to you. Also, access control. If you are thinking about having this open to employees, to the public, to fleet charging, those are all things to start thinking about as well. So really, who's using it? What time are they using it? And how do you want to control the access to everyone?
Yeah, and along those lines, we actually talking to a client that a school actually that wants to keep it restricted to the staff and students during school hours, but then open it up to the community in general after hours, weekends, vacations, etc. Ray, you went through the planning process here for many years, going from 4 ports to 100 ports. Do you want to talk about some of the things you learned along the way?
One of the exciting things that we did at ASU is our university initiative is to sustainability is that we started throwing up solar panels everywhere you could. In the parking industry, it was great because all of our parking garages, just about, except some of the new ones that haven't been fitted yet, but plumbed to be expanded. We threw solar panels on top of all those, which gave us in the parking industry shade on the roof, which was great for us. The other part of it is that the parking lots that we threw up solar panels, I worked with the contractors to make sure, like you said, Jim, we threw in the conduit and the stuff to locations and had enough energy, the power that was there and breakers that were there and the conduit size and everything was set to go. So in the future, we can throw those chargers in. And so when I bought chargers from you, it was quite easy because all that infrastructure and civil work was already done. So that was one thing that was a benefit for you. And also, I do agree, when we do put in new ones, even in our new parking garages, and there's 2 that I was involved in, that we asked them to plumb in for additional chargers for expansion. And in one of our garages, we've already used up all those expansion conduits and now developing other ways to provide power to students and employees and guests to be able to charge their vehicles. So thinking of things outside the box to do this, looking ahead, throwing extra conduit in, looking for opportunities to do this, looking for other ways that you can be able to use charging for EVs. And one of the points that you point out, Jim, about the apartment complexes, obviously around a university, there's a lot of off-campus student housing in apartment complexes. Some of those are new, some of those are not. And even if they are new, they really don't have an expanded EV charging network. So as the numbers that you showed about the number of EVs being purchased, then what happens to those who were EV owners and then bought another EV? They put those on the secondary market. And a lot of students would buy those. So now we have more students coming to campus with EVs, living off campus, but don't have a home charging network. So we find those people coming to the university to use our chargers, which is fine. We can do that, and we can work with them to be able to do that. So there's that mathematical formula that the number of EVs that are around are starting to go up, and a lot more people are affording them due to the used car market. So how do you handle that influx in your situation? Like I said, the off-campus housing is definitely one of those. The fact that we have on-campus housing and students who bring EVs to that, their parents are concerned about them bringing their EV and not having a place to charge. So we want to make sure that we have enough charging ports around that we can maintain availability for the amount of EVs that come to campus. So as you as administrators look at how you want to approach this, you have to really not stay on a normal pathway. You have to broaden that and be able to look at different ways that you can go ahead and provide that opportunity, either expanding the number of conduits for future when you're putting them in. To tell you the truth, we have at ASU, there's a deal with APS, one of our local power companies, where we are putting in a charging system with funding from them. And it's originally set up for only 2 of those, but we've been able to work with them to be able to put in 3 more conduit runs, so we can add 3 more chargers as we expand the program. So these are great things that, number one, it saves you money on the front end because you're doing it all at once. And secondly, like Jim says, it's a plug and play to drop a charger into a place that's already been set up for a charger. So Jim, great job.
Ray, you bring up a fantastic point. In the beginning of the presentation, we talked about the new car market, but a robust new car market flows to a robust used car market. And one of the big secrets in this industry is that the very best used car value right now is a 3 or 4 year old electric vehicle. They're cheap to buy, they're cheap to run, they're cheap to maintain. We see fleets that are reporting things like brakes are lasting 4 times longer with an electric vehicle than with the equivalent gasoline vehicle because of the regenerative braking properties. And the maintenance is so much cheaper that it really makes up for the extra cost of the electric powertrain very, very quickly. So,
Jim, can I just jump in? One thing I did forget
Yeah.
to talk about is just not the fact of the other vehicles. Universities are going to electric fleets, either been mandated by their state legislatures or to cut down the number of gasoline vehicles that they have in their fleets, or to be able to either car share those or to be able to have fleet cars that done. So that is another influx of EV charging that you as administrators have to look at. And where are you going to put those pods? How many vehicles are you going to do that? What kind of management system are you going to have to track those, your fleet and your infrastructure? So those are another big important part that administrators have to look forward thinking to be able to manage.
Absolutely. About 60% of our business is with public entities, cities, municipalities, et cetera. And we often get the question from cities in particular, how should we approach this? What should we be looking at? And the answer usually is twofold. One, what kind of benefits do you want to provide to your citizens that might not have a place to charge on their own, be it a city building, a library, a rec center, even curbside charging, which is something that we're seeing more and more of. And then, as Ray said, the second part is the fleet. While there are quite a few mandates out there, the economics actually really end up being what pulls the trigger. Is when you look at a 5-year total cost of ownership, it's really hard to beat an electric car. And we're not only seeing it in the passenger cars, but we're seeing it in the medium and heavy duty vehicles coming online right now as well. So one of the things that we talk about is also architecture. How does that play into the design of buildings? So, for example, we're seeing parking garages with oversized electrical rooms with those raceways. You don't necessarily have to put the conduit in and the service panels in, the electrical circuit breakers, but at least having the space to do it. So we're starting to see, and also making sure the electrical room is not too far away, so it's really easy to get to. With that, I think my slides are stuck here, so here we go. So really, we always start with the use case. What do you want to achieve? A good example is a grocery store. The average dwell time on a DC fast charger is about 28 minutes. Coincidentally, the amount of time somebody typically goes into a grocery store is about 30 minutes. So a lower powered DC fast charger would be a great choice for a grocery store. If you're talking about retail, however, perhaps a higher powered level 2 station that charges not quite as fast, because you do want to encourage people to stay a little bit longer, shop more, order that extra dessert at the restaurant, et cetera. So I tell my team all the time, the number one place we start always is, what is the use case? What is it today? What is it going to be a couple of years from now? And that really drives the decision as to what's to recommend in terms of the actual hardware and software. So we talked a little bit about new construction. One of the things to keep an eye out for is that a lot of municipalities out there now have in their new building codes requirements to put in either a certain number of plugs, a certain number of parking spaces that are what we call EV ready, so conduit and breakers and wire, and then another couple percentage that are EV capable, which is essentially the empty conduit, the empty service panels, but easy to add as necessary. And some cities, we're talking about 5, 10, 20% of the parking spaces. And then some cities like San Francisco, they want 100% of the new parking spaces to be at least EV capable. And so they're looking 10 years out when you can't buy a gas car any longer. So things to keep in mind, even if your municipality doesn't require it, It's something to think about. So, what's other things to consider is how will you manage it down the road? Or how are you going to handle market shifts? Some of the things to think about when you're choosing a provider is, do they have a parts warranty only or a parts and labor warranty? Do you have the ability in-house to do some of the electrical work, or is that something that you're going to need to outsource? So in fact, even installation in some cases, we have municipal clients that say, look, we got master electricians on staff, so we can handle it. And we're always happy to work with them, coach them, give them all the tools they need to make it a successful installation. Other clients say, I don't know where to start, please help us. So we bring an electrician along to the project. And, but it's important to think about how much you can do in-house, how much you want to outsource. And a couple other things to think about as we get into the final slides here. I would say look for a partner that has some experience. We go to trade shows all the time that we see a big banner that says EV charging expert, and I'll say, how long you been doing this? And they'll say 3 weeks. And given how many incentive dollars that are flowing into this industry, there literally are new entrants every single day. We have a member of our team that went to a hotel show not too long ago, and there was a company that sold mattresses and an EV charger. So this is an industry where experience matters. You definitely look for somebody that can help. Also, one recommendation I'd make is look for a solution that gives you a wide range of options. AXU actually is a great example. When 6 years ago their contract started, there really was one main product that was requested. When it went out to bid, now 5 years later, there's a whole range of products, fleet products, DC fast chargers that didn't even exist 5 years ago. And they wanted to make sure that they had more options available to them as the industry evolves. 3, check incentives. There's a lot of tools out there. The feds maintain a database. We have subscribed to a service that we can plug in a zip code and it'll tell us all the incentives available for that zip code. There's probably more incentives out there than you realize. So also something that really helps with a budget. So check qualifications, check timing, make sure that you're specifying equipment that meets the incentive guidelines. And then lastly, given the nature of this audience, I would also make sure that you check on whether you have the ability to take advantage of a state contract or a cooperative buying program, save yourself the brain damage of an RFP. Everybody is happy when you can do that. There are a lot of resources out there, such as Sourcewell, 1GPA, Equalis, state contracts, you name it. There's a lot of places that you can turn to and make your job a lot easier. So with that, I'll turn it back to Kenny for a couple wrap-up slides, and then I'd love to open it up to Q&A.
Yeah, before I get into those wrap-up slides, let's just get straight into Q&A. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Ray. A lot of great information. I've got a couple questions to get us started right off the bat here. This is to the panel. Actually, this is to Jim. As you indicated on the slide, there's only 250,000 public EV charging stations. Do you know how many EV charging stations in total, or what percentage of EV stations are public? How do you encourage your clients to open the EV charging stations they install to the public?
Yeah, good question. In some ways, the answer is nobody's really sure how many plugs are out there that are not open to the public. I can tell you that given our client base, it all depends on whether it's used for fleet or if it's going to be something that is intentionally open to the public. We see about 50-50 in very rough terms of what's on the public maps and what's not. And of course, none of these numbers include the home stations that are in hundreds of thousands of garages across the country right now. But I actually honestly wish I could tell you a concrete number, because it is something that nobody's really put their finger on exactly. But to your second question, it all goes back to that use case scenario and really engaging with the end user and making sure that they think, all right, here's what you want to achieve today. How do you see that changing in 3 years? How do you see that changing in 5 years? So we'll often have customers that'll say, you know what, we want to keep it open right now after hours to the general public. But as internal demand increases, they want the option to be able to say, you know what, we got to restrict it now. And sometimes it goes the other way. So good question. And I really wish I could have some more solid answers for you on those numbers.
Thank you, Jim. Next question here from Steven. We found some funding for chargers require that parking is available without charge. What park system integrations does ChargePoint have currently? I think that's to Kate.
Yeah, Stephen, thank you for that question. I'm just going to give you a high-level answer, but I'm always happy to follow up with one of our internal experts that can kind of dive into the nitty-gritty of that. In general, we have, I think, over 40 integrations. So we try to integrate with as many systems as we can. Yeah, the one thing I think, well, I'm trying to figure out how to answer this question exactly, but what you want to look at is when you're evaluating any kind of charger, going back to that and what Jim was talking about earlier, is do you have the ability to see the utilization, the reports of these? I think that helps with, you don't necessarily need integration for this, but it helps you understand how many chargers do you need for your site as well, and how many can you leave open to ICE vehicles? Because let's be honest, ICE vehicles aren't going away anytime fast, just more EVs are coming into the market. So we need to consider both customers, absolutely. Stephen, I hope that kind of gives you a general high-level answer to that, but I'm happy to follow up.
Got you. Thank you, Kay. And yeah, we will share everybody's contact information after when we send out the link to the archived version. Josh Cantor asks, what concerns are there about the current generation of chargers becoming obsolete with battery technology changing so fast? Also, what's your take on level 1 versus level 2 chargers? To the panel.
I'm happy to hop in on that. One thing that's great is that we don't really see any obsolescence coming in terms of the plugs themselves. All cars in the US, with the exception of Tesla, have the same plug. If you have a Tesla, it comes with an adapter that makes it literally a second to put on and use the standardized plug. On DC, there has been a couple different standards, but it is solidifying more around what we call the CCS1 plug. There also is the CHAdeMO plug that Nissan used for a long time, but even their newest car is moved over to CCS. So you see some of these big DC fast charger installations, they might have 7 CCS plugs and 1 CHAdeMO plug for those legacy Nissan drivers and a couple of the Mitsubishis. What we are seeing is an increase in speed requirements. So whereas a 32 amp station might have been adequate a couple of years ago, now they're asking for 48 amps and sometimes 80 amps. And what that means is really going from about 20 miles of range in an hour to 50 miles of range in an hour. And a similar dynamic on the DC side, where a couple of years ago, 50 to 60 kilowatts was just fine. Now the federal requirement for the NEVI program are 4 150 kilowatt chargers minimum. So that's where we're really seeing the changes is in speed, but not necessarily in the technology itself. And then the other developments are bells and whistles. Things like a wait list function, for example, that wasn't around a couple years ago. So again, look for a system that has some of these upgrades and are doing over-the-air enhancements as you go. So that's really what we're seeing in terms of obsolescence. So not as big of a concern, I think. And in some cases, actually, it's easy to upgrade. I know ChargePoint, for example, they had their CT 2000 series. And when that upgraded to the 4000, it was the exact same bolt pattern. Now the 6000 series is coming out, and it's the exact same bolt pattern. So, you might have to run new wires that can handle the higher power, but you're not tearing up the ground in order to upgrade that station if you feel like you need to. Kate, do you want to hop in on that, coming from a manufacturer?
No, I think you covered it, Jim. That was nothing else to add to that. That was great.
Thanks.
And I do want to note on Bodan's comment, in the UK, it's a 1-to-10 ratio, 40,000 public chargers to every 4,000 private chargers. So UK doing it well over there.
The UK, yeah, I saw some really fascinating charging solutions when I was there a couple weeks ago. And we're starting to see some of those like big charging plazas with the one I went to had 36 DC fast chargers all around a central facility. Really interesting to see the evolution there.
Thank you. Kate, this is maybe another specific question. Again, if you want to follow up with Kate after this, but do ChargePoint have any programs with the government, with government funding?
Yeah, great question. Because of our business model, we don't directly go for the funding, but we are happy to help our customers figure out funding. So we do have a huge policy team. We're a big voice in government policy that's happening around EV and EV charging. And we do on our online site have you can put in, I think, where you live, and it'll tell you, I believe it's updated. It should be updated. Please let me know if it's not. Any incentives that are out there in your area.
Thank you, Kate. Another question of the panel here. We look like EVs are on average 30 to 40% heavier than a regular car. In most garages that have EV stations, they're usually installed at one corner or the same location at each level. Do you usually review the garage drawings before the station implementation to make sure that parking structures can carry the extra weight from EVs?
Well, I can tell you, we're not engineers, but we work with a lot of engineers. And I'll have Ray hop in on this because he actually went through the building process of a couple of garages before over the last couple of years. Typically, garages are way over engineered. There obviously was the big story in the media a couple of weeks ago about the garage in New York City that collapsed. If you look at the photo, I didn't see any electric vehicles there. It was all SUVs. So, you know, really, I'm more concerned about America's addiction to sport utility vehicles that are sometimes twice as heavy as the equivalent or what they could use with a passenger vehicle. So not something that I'm really concerned about, because I know that engineers really take into account orders of magnitude for safety. So obviously there's going to be dramatic failures that get worldwide attention, but on a percentage basis, you know, it's one of those things that could have happened anywhere. It was anybody in any situation.
I think Jim, just to jump in, I'm sorry, I'm having a little difficulty on my computer, so I'm trying to make sure that this goes through. I'm going to try to switch over to my phone. The design of the garages is not really an issue. The weight disbursement, I think the structural engineers are aware of what needs to be done in that. Don't forget, a lot of garages now are being looked at as not being garages in 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. They want to convert those over to apartment complexes so that structural engineering can be done on the forefront. Obviously, based on the number of EV chargers that you want and how many vehicles may be in the garage. Once they know that up front, they can do that design work to make sure it can withstand the weight. Don't forget, it's a disbursement. I think there's more trouble from a lot of people doing a party on a deck than there is having cars parked in a garage. And you can go back to YouTube and look at a couple of these parties that happened, and you can see the decks bowing from people partying. So the weight distribution, I think, is correct, and the engineers can do that. So,
yeah, Ray, you make a great point. People actually are a lot heavier than cars on a per square foot basis. I grew up in the city of San Francisco, and I was living there when the Golden Gate Bridge 50th anniversary party was, and they closed the bridge and had everybody come walk across the bridge. The only time in history the bridge was actually flat, as opposed to arched up, which is how it's designed to be. But it did well. So, all right, great question on the parking garages, but I think given the engineers that we have working in the industry, that not something I'd be overly concerned about.
Thank you, Jim. And as we wait for Ray to get on, I just wanted to ask about some of the common, you touched on it earlier, but can you tell some of the comment from your side, best practices, pitfalls, some of the things people on the other side should be getting ready if they're starting this type of program?
Yeah, and I'll let Kate hop in here in a second as well. But one of the things that also we see, given there are so many new entrants into this market every single week, is look at solutions where it's not going to be yet another app that the customer needs to download that they're not going to use anywhere else, et cetera. Thankfully we're seeing roaming agreements that are being developed. For example, you can use your ChargePoint card at an EV Connect station and it goes through smoothly, or Electrify America, et cetera. So there's like ATMs, there are the roaming agreements that are popping up. So keep an eye out for a solution that is part of these roaming agreements. Depending on the system, it could be the very same account that they use at their apartment building, at the school, at the movie theater, at the grocery store, and one big environment. So, Kate, I'll let you hop in here as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. I think that's right. Always thinking about, as parking services and parking operators usually do, they're thinking about their customer, their drivers that are coming in. It's a huge customer first industry, which is fantastic. So thinking about, what's your end user experience like? Are they familiar with these chargers? Are they familiar with this app, if there is one? Do they even need an app? How do they pay for this? Those are all things to really, really consider. I'll go back to what I was saying earlier too, of just thinking about how are you structuring, how you I don't want to say charge because that indicates the charging, but how are they paying for this, or what are you charging them when they're charging? Is there idle fees, all of those things. So I think really having clear vision on how you want to structure it, who this is available to, what time you want it available, are all things to consider when looking at an EV charger.
Let me throw one thing in. This is my personal opinion. I can't speak for ChargePoint or Ray either. One of the things that is very disturbing that we're seeing in the industry right now are especially municipalities saying, we want to outsource this all to a third party who's going to own the stations, who's going to operate the stations. We're just going to give over a parking space and they can run it. The danger is that it is impossible to create a positive financial cash flow owning and operating a level 2 charging station as a standalone business. The most popular provider of this in the industry has lost $300 million over the last decade with no end in sight. The math we've done for one particular city client of ours found that a level 2 charging station needs to be fully occupied and charging with no breaks, 12 hours a day on a 24-hour clock, 7 days a week to even consider breaking even. So what happens is these companies and every week there's a new one saying, hey, we have this brilliant idea. We're going to own the stations and we're just going to rent parking spaces. Usually they go out of business in a year and a half when they find out there's no cash flow. There's no money to repair them, so they often go sit broken for long periods of time. The other issue, and this is why I feel that this particular business model is just greenwashing, is they're charging often a 400 or 500% markup on the cost of electricity. Drivers are smart at these days to the point where they say, you know what, I'm not going to pay a 500% markup on electricity. I'm going to go a block away and pay a 200% markup on the cost of electricity. So just be careful of a lot of these new vendors and some of the older vendors coming in and promising unicorns and rainbows. Because usually what we've seen is that the cities that try and get into these contracts are desperate to get out of them 3 or 4 years later when they realize that drivers aren't using the stations, they're falling into disrepair, and a lot of the promises that were made at the beginning, like revenue share, never come to fruition because you can't share revenue that's not there. So there's a lot of reasons to install charging, whether it is an amenity or a societal benefit. But having it as a standalone business, I just want to caution everybody against taking a look at those because it really has been a disaster over and over and over again in this industry.
Yeah, Jim, I think that's a really good point. I just want to touch on that a little bit more too. Municipalities definitely face a lot of challenges with public EV charging. and it's just the nature of how parking is in municipalities. But something to think about there, a lot of times they have to offer a couple different brands of charging, right, to be more equitable, which is great. But thinking about how do you manage those chargers, and how do you keep your eyes on the maintenance of them? Are they working? Are they functioning correctly? So all things, do you get notifications if they're down? Not depending on the public to notify you, because that's not always going to happen or in a timely manner. So these are all things to think about. How does it integrate with your parking services and municipalities who's managing enforcement as well? I do think, it's hard for municipalities because they don't have that extra bandwidth or extra people to manage these. So how is it a low lift for them, but without outsourcing it for a whole nother team to manage without that reliability? So that's a great point, Jim.
Thank you. And Ray, do you have anything to add, especially from the university? I know we have a couple university folk on the line. I'm not sure if he was able to reconnect. Maybe not. Okay, well, we'll get back
Ray's
to
having the same technology day I had on Monday, where I was on 4 different platforms: WebEx, Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, and every one of them had some sort of issue. So I think we
were one with the internet. Okay, well, we'll wait for Ray to get back, see if he has any opinions on that. But I will move on to a couple of other questions as we are running out of time here. I have a time for a couple questions, so feel free to throw those in the chat or unmute. You can unmute yourself to ask the question as well. Bodan asks, we have a similar wireless parking space monitoring sensors. I'm interested in developing this year and the next cooperation with public EV charging station operators to help them have parking data from their EV charging parking spaces to combine with their data to avoid icing or EV hogging. We'll be glad to meet anyone interested. And then he lists where he gets those data from. So follow up with Bodan if you're interested in that. Any other questions? Again, feel free to unmute or throw them in the chat if, for our panelists. I'm not sure if we got Ray back. I don't think so.
Well, I'll take this opportunity to say that we threw a lot of information out there, but I know that Kenny and the team at IPMI is going to send out contact information. So don't hesitate to reach out to me, to Kate, to Ray, and with some of those questions that you might have, and we'll be happy to do a post-event follow-up if that makes more sense.
Yes. If you have any really detailed questions, please, we will get that contact information to you. And as we wind down here, Jim, do you mind going over one slide? I just want to talk to you about our EV readiness survey, as IPMI surveys all our members and folks about EV readiness. We ask if you can, please take that survey if you haven't already, and also submit a case study for consideration. We are deep in the EV world right now, looking at everything that's going on with EV. As Jim mentioned, it's constantly evolving, changing. New laws, so please submit there, and also explore IPMI's library of free resources and related education. We have a lot of stuff on EV. If I'm not sure, your slides might be stuck. There's some
QR. I tried to resume the slide share and it's not responding, so I do apologize for that.
No problem. Yeah, you might have to reshare the screen, so no problem. Josh slides in with another question. Any planning budget estimates on infrastructure costs for surface lot EV chargers?
And Kenny, I could probably explain it better.
Go ahead, Josh.
Like, as you talked about, obviously the retrofit costs are far greater than when you're planning or building a facility. But are there any general industry estimates on the infrastructure costs, that tend to be much greater than the actual cost of the stations when you're trying to plan? So for instance, if you're looking at putting 10 level 2 chargers in, I know every situation is going to be, different. I know, and we've spoken to some of your folks on the EV bus charging, and they gave me a very grand estimate of about $80,000 for a fast charger that was for a bus charger, but I didn't know if for EV chargers, if there were any good industry numbers to use.
That I wish I could give you a really good answer on that, because we've seen installations that have been $800 because the electric room is right next door to where you want to put the charger. We actually did a project where the charger itself was about $7,000 and the installation was $34,000, but they really wanted to do it, so they went ahead and did it. And this was all level 2. So on DC, we often will see like a 1-to-1 ratio, cost of the system versus cost of the installation. But one thing I will encourage you to look out for is talk to your utility. Some of the bigger, more forward-looking utilities in the country, like Dominion, Duke, Southern California Edison, PG&E, Xcel, have programs where they will bring in a lot of the infrastructure and absorb quite a bit of that cost if you're doing a project that is big enough to pique their interest. Wine Electric is another one that actually is just launching that right now. And that can be a fantastic way to preserve some budget. But they do want to make sure that it's a sizable enough commitment from the site host part. So, Kate, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, same. I wish I could give you some numbers on that. I will say that, DC is generally just a higher cost as of right now. Hopefully the market rectifies that down the road, but then level 2. So you can definitely expect that, but no hard numbers at this time. But yes, definitely check with your electric company. They are often willing to help.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point to make. Electric companies that are thinking about this very strategically, this is a great opportunity for them. So they really have developed these programs where they see this as one of them told me, their best opportunity since air conditioning. So don't hesitate to reach out, because they'll probably be very positive when you do.
Yeah, that's definitely right. I used to work with a lot of electricity companies on their sustainability programs, not EV exactly, but I do know that there's a lot out there that received funding over the last 5 years, and they're not always sure what to do with it, or it takes them a little while to figure it out. So, but they are interested in figuring out how to make it a more common stay in their cities and towns.
Absolutely. And before we go, I just want to tell everybody, come to say hello to the team at IPMI. We'll be there with bells on, and it's a great event. Always look forward to it. I don't think we've ever had it at Fort Worth before, but I imagine there'll be a lot of barbecue and cowboy hats. Kenny, I think you're on mute.
There will definitely be cowboy hats. So yes, please join us in Texas if you're going to be there. Say hi. Yes, if there are no other questions, we thank you everybody for joining us. We thank Jim, Kate, and Ray today for joining us for today's Shop Talk and answering all those questions. And thank you everybody for joining us today. We hope to see you at the next Shop Talk. If not, I'll see you at the IPMI conference. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.